I think everyone's got a roadmap associated with some sort of business improvement methodology. Back in the late 90s when I initially learnt Lean and Six Sigma methods, we had roadmaps back then, and everyone kind of comes up with their own roadmap. But the interesting thing about these roadmaps is they're very useful from a teaching perspective, because that was kind of how we approached it back in the early 2000s, end of the 1990s. And very useful in terms of communicating where different tools belong in a sequence of events. And that's how we've actually presented the content in Process Mastery, the textbook. Now, the most important point to consider here is, how do you convert that into something more useful? The question that we want to answer in this video is, how does it all come together from a practical project standpoint where there's a bias towards the use of lean methods? So just as a backdrop here, we approach a lean oriented type project slightly different than we would a Six Sigma oriented project. And the difference in those two methods or types of projects we've explained in another video, but I'm going to focus on this roadmap here. Now, we'll begin with a blank slate here. The whole thing begins with, regardless of whether or not you're doing, what type of project you're doing, it begins with an understanding of some sort of performance gap that you've got that affects or is within your value stream. And business improvement adds value when it does things that's going to add value through that value stream, or things that affect that value stream. And the value stream is the thing that actually makes you your money. So we're monitoring the performance. We find that we've got a performance gap there. So what we'll do is we'll go and give that to someone as a project. Now, when they get this, it's going to be, let's just assume it's a business improvement practitioner of some kind, green belt, black belt, or whatever, depending on the framework you've got in your company. Then we guide people down the pathway of doing the setup phase of their project, which involves three fundamental things. The very first thing, and you can see it up here, we've kind of got a visual representation of it. They sit with the project sponsor and they kind of kick off a conversation about what's the performance gap and getting information around the scoping of it and everything associated with putting a project charter together. So they will have that meeting. It's a formal meeting where they sit down and have that conversation. They then leave that meeting because they don't have all the information they need to plan a project at this point. So what they will do is they'll go out and do what we call or refer to as pre-measuring. They will go to the workplace, to the work area, wherever it is that the performance gap exists, and they will have a look at the process. They might spend a couple of days doing that, because what they're going to do in the pre-measuring is they're going to observe it. They're going to collect data. It might be some sort of process mapping that they do, or they collect physical data from some sort of system, or it might be time data, it might be data associated with movement. Whatever the case may be, it depends on the type of problem that they're looking at. And then it's that pre-measuring activity that gives them sufficient information for them to sit down and plan the project from beginning to end. And I mean right up to the point where you've got a implementation plan around solutions within your hand. And what the solutions are, they're not going to come up with, but how they would go about getting to that point, that's what they actually can plan. So they plan it from beginning to end, and it's that information that they can take back to the next meeting. Now, the thing to add to that is when they're doing the pre-measuring, that phase also involves stakeholder engagement. And when we're coaching people on, leading organisational change, one of the most important things that they need to undertake is engage stakeholders when you've got the problem, but before you know the solutions, because you've got to get buy-in to the problem. And then at a later point, you're going to get buy-in to the solutions and the actions that you're going to take. They then go back in the third step, and then they have a meeting again with the project sponsor. And the purpose of that is to now take that plan to the table, and they're going to set up an operating agreement. And an operating agreement is basically an agreement that has two parts to it. It's an agreement around everything that the sponsor needs in order for that project to work, in order for the project leader to meet the values of the project sponsor. And the second part of it is getting agreement around the plan from beginning to end. And it's this operating agreement that sets you up to get momentum. The number one complaint over the years has always been getting time and people, right? People just don't seem to get that. And what I point out to people is, if you didn't get agreement around the plan and when you needed people and how long you needed them for at the beginning, then all you ever had agreement on was the problem or the project, not the plan for executing that project. So we set up this operating agreement in the third phase, and then we move into the project proper. So the way it would work is we'd bring a team together, and if it's more lean oriented, then this is the general pathway that we would follow. We'd bring the team together, do some sort of team, consolidation or team alignment activity. Then we might lay out the process flow, extract an activity flow chart from the people in that group, and the people in that group should be the people who actually do the work, at least those people. There might be additional people who can contribute to this, but it's that group of people who can now give you the information to document a process. Because you've seen it in the pre-measuring phase, then the project leader is in a position to be able to facilitate that process more accurately. They know what to ask. They might do some sort of constraint analysis, because the project, if it has a lean bias, is going to be focused on cycle time or inventory or throughput or something like that. So some sort of constraint analysis, whether it be time or throughput volumes, would take place in there. There would be other pre-measured data that you would have collected, you would put up on the screen or whatever the case may be. It might be numerical or quantitative data, but it could also be movement data or spaghetti diagrams and things like that. The other thing that we do, and we found tremendous value from this, is to bring root cause analysis into play, because the limitation of a lot of lean project tools is that they focus on the analysis of the process specifically, whether it be cycle time or throughput. But what I always found value in is having that additional conversation about what other causal factors that you don't see laid out in a process map would have an effect on the metric or the thing that we're trying to fix. And it's this part that kind of adds in some additional value to the project work. But that would be mainly the content of the first meeting. That meeting might take around about 4 hours. Okay, now, when you leave that meeting, there may be a period of time where you need to go and validate something or get some more data to confirm things, and that would take place between that analysis meeting and the next meeting. And the next meeting is what I would refer to as a solution meeting. We would then take everything that we know into that meeting, and then we would utilize whatever tools make sense from a problem perspective to solve this one from the lean toolkit, or we would drift into tools from other methodologies as well. But the core tools that we would think about in terms of a lean project is removing non-value added time, hence that little icon down there, implementing a pull system, right, moving from push to pull, which controls whip, redesigning the process so it's a change in the way that you do things, redesigning the workplace to take out movement. That ZTLU just refers to kind of like the standard structures or designs that you would reference in designing, particularly in the manufacturing world, a work area. Implementing 5S to help create flow through a workplace, SMED or quick changeover, and process balance. All of those tools there, right, they offer some sort of value for a different type of project or improvement that you might be facing. And that would be the end of the second meeting. You would then leave that meeting, and ideally you'd have an implementation plan for those solutions. You would then go and implement the solutions, go and build the solution part of here. So you can see effectively all we've done is 2 meetings here. That second meeting, generally, in my experience, has taken around about 4 hours. Now, the other thing that's got to be done is you've got to come up with some sort of control mechanisms. So that's the responsibility of the project team leader to work out how they're going to monitor this and control it and put in place some sort of corrective action plan in case things go off track. And at the end of the day, you end up with this simple visual flow. So I hope that kind of made sense. I want to wrap this up with an important reference to the sequence or number of meetings. And the intent here is to kind of change people's, what I would refer to as traditional thoughts about the time frame for doing projects and how many meetings are involved. And we've been exercising this particular model for at least the last 15 years in doing project work. First of all, 2 formal meetings with the line manager. Doesn't mean you're not going to catch up and meet, to update the sponsor or the line manager who's involved in the project. But there are 2 formal meetings. The first one is here where we begin the process of identifying all the scoping details associated with the project charter for this particular project. And then the second meeting, formal meeting, is around building that operating agreement and getting agreement to the plan and the people you need and the timeframes you need them. Then The other part of it from a meeting perspective is, you'll notice, 2 formal project meetings for the project team. In my experience, these have been 4-hour meetings. I have never not had a company provide people for those 4-hour meetings, because we're limiting how many or how frequent we're doing this kind of get together. We're optimizing the amount of productivity we get in each of those meetings by making it a bit longer. And the other thing about it is, as long as there's value in the project, generally you can justify a reason to put the people on there, or backfill, or whatever the case may be, whatever you need to get those people for those meetings. So the first meeting is an analysis meeting. There might be, a day or two in between where you need to go and validate or collect data or something. And the second meeting is a solution meeting. Now, for me, that whole structure there, 50% of the project is that front end. Okay. The second 50% of the project is this part. And at that point, you've got an implementation plan. How long it takes to implement those solutions, I have no idea. It depends on the solution specifically. That part up to this point, we can control that. And in the last 15 years, that has always taken us 2 weeks of work, 1 week for the prep phase, or the pre-measuring phase and setup, and then 1 week for the analysis and solution phase. Those weeks might be back to back, or those weeks might be separated by a gap in between. It depends on the project. So you can complete projects in a much faster way. This is kind of like applying the Kaizen concept for those who are familiar with the term. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you get something out of it.